October Planning Commission meeting. Ms. Istanis, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers.
Present.
Mr. Rogers represents the Berkeley District. Ms. Null.
Present.
Ms. Null represents the Stonehouse District. Mr. Rose.
Here.
Mr. Rose represents the Roberts District and is vice chair to the commission. Mr. Haldeman.
Here.
Mr. Haldeman is an at-large member. Mr. O'Connor.
Here.
Mr. O'Connor is an at-large member. Mr. Kraft.
Here.
Mr. Kraft represents the Powhatan District. Mr. Polster.
Here.
Mr. Polster represents the Jamestown District and is chair of the commission. I'm Susan Istanis, Director of Planning for the county, and it's my pleasure to serve as secretary to the commission. Sitting to my left is Ms. Liz Parman, Deputy County Attorney. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda is the public comment. The topics that are not subject to public hearing. Speakers limited to 3 minutes. Do we have any speaker cards?
We do not.
Okay, I will open and close the public comment. Reports of the commission, I don't think we have any this month. The consent agenda is items that are deemed to be non-controversial, and we have one item, the minutes. Does anybody want to pull anything? If not, a motion, please.
Motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, approved. Next item on our agenda is the public hearing, SUP 22-0017, Z22-002, and MP 22-002, 4399 John Tyler Highway, 5 Forks Self-Storage Facility. Ms. Condon, please, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. Mr. Greg Davis has applied on behalf of Stein Investment Group to amend the adopted master plan and proffers for 5 Forks at Governor's Grove, as well as for a special use permit to permit a self-storage facility at 4399 John Tyler Highway and allow for a boundary line adjustment to utilize a portion of 4365 John Tyler Highway for the stormwater facilities. These parcels total 8.09 acres, are zoned mixed use, and are designated mixed use and moderate density residential. Both properties are inside the primary service area and currently undeveloped. The proposed facility would be 3 stories, approximately 100,000 square feet, and includes 700 storage units. The proposed application includes an entrance from the parcel to John Tyler Highway and the addition of a center left turn lane on John Tyler Highway. Staff finds this proposal to be consistent with the 2045 comprehensive plan overall and recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the special use permit, amended master plan, and amended proffers to the Board of Supervisors, subject to the proposed conditions and proffers. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have, and the applicant is available as well. Thank you.
Any questions for staff? Mr. Haldeman.
One building or 2?
One building.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Well, I have a couple questions. One is in reviewing the staff report, it was noted that this project could serve as a primary commercial use for surrounding neighborhoods. And could you go into a little more detail? As I didn't really anticipate a self-storage facility being a primary commercial use, and I just was wondering if you could share a little bit of the thought process in that regard.
Yeah, of course. So this parcel on the 2005 master plan was labeled to be the commercial piece for that mixed-use development. So I believe that's what that's referring to.
And I wanted to address condition number 3, SUP condition number 3, and per my email that I sent previously, I'd like to add a sentence at the end, if my colleagues and the applicant have no objection, talking about supplemental plantings, to say a minimum of 50% of the additional plantings shall be species native to Eastern Virginia.
Yes, sir.
Is that acceptable for staff?
That is acceptable for staff.
Does the applicant agree? Yes, sir. Any comments from members? Are there any other questions for staff? Okay, hearing none. Any disclosures? Okay, none. So at this point, I will open the public hearing. Ms. Istanis, do we have any speaker cards?
Mr. Chairman, we have Greg Davis, who is the applicant.
Mr. Davis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Commission, good evening. I'm Greg Davis with the James City County offices of the Kaufman and Knowles Law Firm, and it's my pleasure to be here this evening before you representing Stein Investment Group, the developer. Property owner of this project is 5 Forks 2 and 5 Forks 3, the longtime owner of this 5 Forks area. My client Stein Investment Group is here, represented by Daniel Ginberg, Jason Linscott, and Jeff Stein. The project engineer is AES Consulting Engineers, and Howard Price, who's familiar to you all, is here. The traffic study for the project was done by Dexter Williams at DRW, and my firm handles legal. With me tonight is my colleague, Benny Zhang. Stein Investment Group is worth introduction. It's a family company, third generation. They've done more than 60 storage projects nationally, mostly in the Midwest and east of the Mississippi. Media in the industry space has named Stein a top 20 storage owner and operator. And notably, they have some local projects, some on the drawing board and some in existence. And I'll show you some pictures in a minute. Norfolk, Henrico, Hanover, and Glen Allen. Also, seemed important to me to point out to the commission that Stein Investment Group is a long-term owner. They don't develop these and flip them to a new owner. Their business model is to hold these long-term. So the team that has developed this project in conjunction with your staff will be the team that is dealing with the county on construction, site planning, and long-term ownership issues. I mentioned the Richmond locations of the Stein projects, which trade under the name Space Shop. This is a location in Richmond. This is the office space in the self-storage facility there. And here's the Space Shop photo. I'm going to come back to this, but I'll ask you to note in a number of these photographs the fact that the self-storage facility is next to residential use. In these pictures, you can see it off to the left. This is perhaps a more urban setting than some. Here's that same building. It's a wintertime shot, so maybe not as leafy as you would expect in the summertime. This is a project outside Atlanta, which matches more the architecture and more perhaps conservative style of the project we propose here for Five Forks. Again, if you look to the right, you'll see that this facility by Stein Investment Group is located right next to residential neighborhood, a very desirable one. These conceptuals were in your packet, but I thought it helpful to you and perhaps to the public too to see what we envision the project will look like upon construction. This is looking eastward toward the 7-Eleven down Route 5 with the project there on the right. And this is looking back to the west, so looking over the top of the 7-Eleven at Five Forks toward the project. You've all been on Route 5 in this area many times, but I'll remind you that it's downhill from our site from the 7-Eleven to Powhatan Creek where the desal plant entrance is. And that's important, I think, in understanding some of the height drawings that we'll produce tonight. This is a view of the project from the project entrance on Route 5. And again, you can see the downward slope of the land makes that bottom or basement story visible on this end of the building, not visible at the more easterly end. These architecturals are part of your package, and our proffers and SUP conditions require construction substantially in conformity with these drawings. I show this south elevation, which is a brick wall, to make the point that that was not the way the architecture started, but to conform with the Five Forks principles and working with staff, my client made that change to the architecture at some expense, but to make that side more attractive, even though it faces the desal plant and the parking lot from Claire Bird Baker. This conceptual layout shows the rough location of the entrance here, as this is the Five Forks intersection there. And I wanted to point to this element of the plan because it's important. This is the left turn lane for both turns this way off Route 5 as well as this way off Route 5 that are proffered as a part of the plan and shown in detail on the master plan in your package. This will improve access for all four of the driveways in the neighborhood, not just the Five Forks storage facility that we propose tonight. Our traffic generation is so small as to not produce any traffic impact, and yet we bring this forward as an attractive attribute of the project. Let me talk to you a little bit about self-storage today. In the old days, you saw a series of little garages, mini storage we called them, and it was a holding use. You could put up mini storage fairly inexpensively and get some rent revenue while you waited for development to reach out to your site or for more dense development to evolve. Today, this Class A climate control facility will be a $10 or $15 million project. It's purpose-built. There's only one thing you can do with this building. It's not going to be condos one day or offices one day. There's no plumbing or electricity for that, and the layout is just inconsistent with any conversion. And there'll be no outdoor storage of the type you may have seen with mini storage, where boat spaces, truck, cars, vehicles are parked outside. Storage is hot now. It's the use of self-storage, and particularly these Class A spaces, is growing. My client's expertise in the industry suggests that it's multifactorial. Part of it is people maybe buying smaller houses and need a place to store things. Part of it is remote work. People are clearing out that storage space in their house and setting up a desk, putting a computer there, and that's how they go to work. But then there's always the use of self-storage for the Christmas decorations and the winter clothes in the summer and the bicycle in the winter. The location of this project is important, and I think, Mr. Kropp, this may go to your question. Stein Investment Group analyzes the use of this project as a local commercial use. It's not a destination like a Target. It's a neighborhood commercial use like the Harris Teeter across the street. People are not going to drive from Toanna to go to the Harris Teeter at Five Forks. They might drive from Toanna to go to the Target in Newtown. Well, that's the way Stein envisions the market for self-storage, typically in these 4-mile trade areas. They analyze this based on where the competitor storage facilities are, what do the road networks in the neighborhoods nearby look like. People want to drop by the storage facility on the way to and from the hardware or the grocery store. It's a low-intensity use, often located between commercial or shopping centers like that at Five Forks and residential neighborhoods. Stein tracks its users through a sophisticated security system. It's a keypad entry system. So they can tell you how many people have come and gone from their Richmond facility today or over the years. And if you average that data out, it's about 15 vehicle trips per day. It's just nothing. Some days it's 5 vehicle trips on a facility of this size, and a big day might be 20. Very little trip generation in these secure facilities. And there's really no demand on county services. This development doesn't generate residents or school children. There's no increased demand for parks and rec, EMS. There'll be 1 bathroom at the facility, so no drain on county resources. Unlike other plans which have come forward or might well come forward for this site, Rite Aid was proposed there, and VDOT, in fact, approved the traffic access plan on both Ironbound and Route 5 for the Rite Aid before that application was pulled. And so other users would likely be traffic generators and want access on the Ironbound, which we do not see. We'll finish up with just a few planning points. We've consented to conditions and proffers that provide that the planning director reviews our architecture, our landscaping, our signage, and our screening to make sure they comport with what you have before you tonight. So there's good county control over what this project looks like. There are 50-foot landscape buffers surrounding the project. To Mr. Kropp's point, absolutely no objection for the record from the applicant to the additional SUP condition, which would require native plantings on 50% of those added per condition 3. Staff points in its report to the fact that the project is consistent with the Five Forks primary principles and the new comp plan. Staff says the only comment is perhaps that this is a use of increased intensity. I would beg to differ with that in that, well, first of all, the former use of this project was from a mobile home park. So this is really a redevelopment project adding commercial use to the county. Yes, the square footage of this building is larger than perhaps a small retailer or a drugstore, but there's more open space and less, nay, hardly any traffic generated by the project. So despite the architectural as you have that suggest a bigger building, that's not a more intensive use, and the staff agrees. And I'll finish, members of the commission, by letting you know that this has been quite a process. We filed conceptual review application in March of 2022. Got comments back from all departments. Initially, we proposed access on Ironbound and Route 5. That evolved into a full traffic impact analysis, which we submitted. We've changed our architecture, our buffer plan in response to comments from staff. So it has been a rigorous and time-consuming process, but at the end of the day, we're proud of the project we bring before you. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll thank the commission for its attention. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. I ask the commission to recommend approval.
Go ahead.
Mr. Davis, good evening. Just one quick question. In the Exhibit 2 of the TIA, it shows two facilities, a 94,000 square foot building and then a proposed mini storage. So will this just be limited to the one building at 100,000 square feet, or should we expect that there might be a comeback for future development of that smaller parcel off Ironbound?
It's a good question. No, one building. Initially, our concept plan showed two, and there were some advantages associated with two buildings if the Ironbound Road access was viable. When we took that off the table, the master plan was revised. So if you look in your packet, you'll see the binding master plan shows the one building.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? We thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Polster.
Do we have any other speaker cards?
No, we do not, Mr.
Is there
Chairman.
anybody else that would like to speak on this item? Seeing and hearing none, I will close the public comment and open it up for discussion or a motion. Mr. Rogers.
Just a quick comment, but as someone who lives and serves for that Berkeley district, there's a number of things that, at least in my opinion, are very positive about this application. One being, you mentioned there's no elementary school children being produced. That's very good. It is right next to a school that, as somebody who gets calls from residents there, you know, the thought is that school is so overcrowded. Anything that brings more people, brings more students, this building will be attractive. It won't bring more traffic near those school children. It will, seems to be a quiet sort of business. A lot of our newer businesses are wedding venues and two microbreweries and great fun, and also generators of a lot of new comments of noise and things in the evenings. This is, to me, just seems an ideal use in that it's a still quiet, low traffic structure going on property that's already zoned to accommodate this kind of structure, and therefore I at least plan to support it.
Ms. Knoll.
I was just going to say, I'm very impressed by the design. I think it's beautiful. I think it's very attractive. When I drove down there, I thought with the buffer, the trees, nobody's going to see most of it anyway. And I do believe there's a need in storage facilities for some of the ones that are climate controlled, which is very important to people that have artwork and things that are worth a lot of money. So I think it's a great idea.
Any other comments? Do I have a motion?
Well, I just, you know, I think it's a great concept. I just think it's the wrong location. You know, when we look at our comp plan and we look at what we consider the higher density areas inside the PSA and having opportunities to do mixed use close to schools creates a more walkable environment. You know, I spent a couple of hours out on the site over the weekend, and there's a weird juxtaposition of uses going on here now. If you go over to the John Tyler Business Center, there's warehouse spaces that's being used for what I would consider to be neighborhood commercial uses. So there's a 10,000 square foot building that's warehouse and retail, and it has 4 or 5 hairstylist salons in there. You know, you go to the old Branscombe construction site, that's now, although there's a building supply in the warehouse piece behind, the front part has become office space for the Rappahannock area Agency on Aging. Sorry, it's a mouthful. So what was originally designed north and east of that intersection to be sort of the commercial enterprises and west and south the more residential uses. I'm watching the larger commercial uses are now getting moved into that residential side of it. So I think it's a great looking building. I think it's a great use, but I just think it's the wrong location because I think there's other opportunities if this is the area east or north of that intersection that could be considered. So the way it's tonight, I don't intend to support it.
Any other comments, Mr. Kraft?
It was not a done deal for me either. When I took a look at it, I had some concerns, and I had to actually try to weigh the pluses and minuses. Some of the pluses were the fact that it's an infill development, that it was mentioned in the staff report. It adds a commercial component to a mixed-use area that right now is all residential, and so that's a plus. I was a little concerned about the leap from the original master plan showing 25,000 square feet of commercial jumping to 100,000 square feet of commercial, and I understand, I guess, the difference between density and intensity. My initial thought was that this sort of flew in the face of the comp plan because the comp plan doesn't recommends against increased commercial density on these parcels, but the square footage is higher, but the traffic impact is still negligible. So for me, it was sort of a struggle. I'll probably come down in support of it, but I think Mr. O'Connor brings up some very good concerns about the project, and I shared some of those concerns as well.
I think the piece that caught me was the amount of land that's going to be open space that is essentially going to be a buffer to the Claire Bird School back there. And of course, that terrain slopes back down that way. And so the buffering of all of that and the open space piece, and it separates the Five Forks desalinization plant, seemed to me at least to be a good fit, that any kind of intense development on that is really kind of prevented at this point for it. I know it's probably trivial, but I know we've been trying to connect the sidewalks along that road to the school forever and ever. And this development, in fact, connects those. And I know there's been a little bit of controversy for the crosswalk from the village square across there, but that now opens that whole to being something that's walkable on both sides. And maybe at some point there'll be something from the governor's townhouses that allows folks to go across that way and into it. And so from that perspective, and the intensity of the development, I think we all saw in their report with their automated system that their peak visits are for 100,000 building facility is like 13 or 12 in the October-November timeframe. Other than that, it's at a low rate. So the impact on the traffic piece, especially for that fork, once again, is a way to permit, let's say, any growth for other uses that would be more intense aren't going to occur on that piece of property. I also like the idea that we're not going to be able to go into the Ironbound side of that at all, because that would have been just tragic in terms of the traffic there. So I do intend to support it. Mr. Rose.
I have a question about the sidewalks, because I saw the same thing. Can you go to the slide that showed the multi-use paths? And do they connect? Because it struck me as they were sort of pieces that were just floating and didn't. Yeah, oh, that one. Go back.
Oh, sorry. Can I go back?
There's a cut through the 7-Eleven in the one diagram.
This one?
Yeah, like at least the way they show
Right.
the multi in gray there, they just seem like they sort of stop and end at property boundaries. Are they connecting to something else?
The connection that I'm talking about is going in the opposite direction towards the Claire Bird, where it's now connected that way. You're right. It doesn't connect through the 7-Eleven.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? Have a motion.
I'd be happy to make a motion if you put the facing screen back up. 'Cause- Oh, wait a minute, I have it here, never mind. Got it, nope, got it.
Got it?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend approval of SUP 22-0017, rezoning 22-0002, and Master Plan Amendment 22-0002 with attached proffers.
Ms. Istanis, we have a motion on the floor.
Would that include the modification suggested by Mr. Kraft for?
Yes, it would.
the
Thanks
vegetative
for reminding me, yes.
buffer? Mr. Kraft,
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor,
No.
Mr. Haldeman,
Aye.
Mr. Rose,
Aye.
Ms. Knoll,
Aye.
Mr. Rogers,
Aye.
Mr. Polster.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item on our agenda is Planning Commission's considerations. And I know that we have Ms. Knoll for the October Board of Supervisors meeting. Is there any other considerations or requests? If not, Planning Director's report. Ms. Istanis.
Thank you. I do not have anything to add. Just wanted to give a quick shout out to Terry Costello, who received the 2023 Service Award at the annual Virginia Association of Zoning Officers, or VAZO conference, for her service as chair of the Education Committee. So that is in your report. Just wanted to make a verbal mention of it.
I noticed in the spreadsheet that you have a very busy calendar coming up. Do we know what we're going to do for the Policy Committee or the DRC this month?
I do not have that information in front of me. I can get it for you, though.
Okay, I think what's coming up next week, so that's fine. So the next piece we have is Planning Commission discussions and requests. Do we have any discussion items?
Just the one that comes up quite frequently when we deal with solar panels and buffering, like tonight, amending that condition number 3. Didn't know if we could make arrangements to have more of a boilerplate verbiage, because I end up emailing every time one of these cases come in, and it would just maybe make it flow a little bit more efficiently if we had that, if there's no objections by the colleagues to, there's been a couple cases where for the solar panels, we specify native grasses and pollinators and so on. And then for buffering, when there's additional replacement buffering that has to take place, I usually request that 50% be, at least 50% be plants native to Eastern Virginia.
Sometimes seems like it's something that happens in the staffing process, but it's not very obvious. And so it may be hidden with Mr. Roberio's process where he is doing that, but it's not evident when we start seeing the cases that it's not there. So it may be that it's there, but it's not distinct enough to know it. So that's why the question every time, I think.
Let me chat with Paul about that and see what we can do. Thank you.
Doesn't the code require pollinators for solar panels now?
Haven't got an ordinance yet.
I
No,
know
the state code.
As far as I know, is that the direction from the DEQ will not be out till December of '24. The recommendations that I've seen in their reports does do that. And of course, the self-guide that the DEQ has, their gold standard, is they do put pollinators in there. But I think we're going to see that in the next coming year out of the DEQ where it will be required. Especially I think the point about the native Virginia plants is that we're talking about the native Virginia plants to this county because it's specified that way. I mean, I'm not too interested in what happens in Charlottesville.
Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of the solar farm developers that work statewide, they have pretty much built into all of their project plans for the solar farm to include pollinators and so on, but I wasn't aware whether it had actually passed the state code yet.
And I think we've also seen when they've done vegetative buffers and they've gone to whoever the firm was that they use for the landscape architectures, sometimes in the details of them, will specify exactly what the plants will be and the size for. So I think we're just trying to get some specificity that, you know, it's a normal condition that you would normally see.
Stan, thank you.
Rose,
Does it ever get checked?
I'm sorry?
Ever get checked? So 50% native plants, they build the building, they put the buffer in. Does somebody go check that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least when I was building stuff, they did.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's good.
And it has to be,
Since
and depending on the project and the location, they'll often come back in a year's time to make sure that, you know, if you planted 100 trees, there's still 100 live trees there. So, that's been my personal experience.
And I've also seen two projects in Toano where staff has come back after the site plans have been approved and installed, and they have come back and looked to see specifically what has been planted in there. So it's my experience as well that they do.
There's a landscape sheet that's part of the site plan, and it has an inventory of the plants that are
You
there,
get an
so.
inspection and somebody else will check those. Oh.
Any other items for discussion?
Just to go to Rob, just not to belabor the point, but I also know that if there's the approved plant list and then you want to make substitutions, Jose has been requiring that you submit a formal list saying instead of this, we want to plant this. So they seem to stay on top of that.
Other discussions? If not, can I hear a motion for adjournment?
motion to adjourn.
We are adjourned till the 1st of November, 23. Thank you.
Good job.